Imagine uh, navigating a massive high-stakes construction project. You're dealing with local police, public security officials, strict zoning boards, all of that.
Yeah, a total bureaucratic nightmare usually.
Right, exactly. And if you are like most people, you would probably prepare for this by bringing permits, maybe hiring a tough negotiator, or just bracing yourself for endless battles.
Oh, absolutely. You go in ready for a fight.
But what if you brought something completely different? What if you walked into those offices armed with nothing but unconditional love and, like, pure sincerity?
I mean, honestly, it sounds completely absurd.
It really does, almost delusional. And yet today, we're taking you on a deep dive into the writings of a man who claims to have used exactly that approach to unlock this protective halo of sincerity from everyone he meets.
Yeah, it's a radical departure from how modern society operates, for sure. What we are exploring today is a deeply reflective essay titled True Feelings Everywhere Across the World.
And this was written by Su Feng, right?
Right. Written by Swiffing in early 2025. And it's not just, a theoretical piece of philosophy. Swiffing is reflecting on more than 60 cycles of seasons, decades of his life, really traveling across Africa, Oceania, Asia, and North America.
That is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. And after all those miles and interactions, he arrives at a conclusion about human nature that just completely rejects modern cynicism.
So our mission today is to figure out how this actually works. Because if you spend, I don't know, 5 minutes on social media, you are bombarded with the idea that every human interaction is fundamentally a transaction.
Oh, yeah, the hustle culture mindset.
Exactly. The narrative is that everyone wants something from you. But the premise of this text offers an entirely different framework for living.
And to understand that framework, we have to establish his foundational definition. Because throughout the text, when the author talks about true feelings, he is not simply talking about being polite or networking or just being an agreeable person.
All right, it's much deeper than that.
Much deeper. He defines true feelings as emotions that are given freely and selflessly, with absolutely zero ulterior motives, and crucially, zero expectations of return.
Zero expectation.
Okay?
Which is honestly incredibly hard to conceptualize in a world where almost everything we do is tied to a desired outcome.
Precisely. And to truly grasp the weight of this zero expectation philosophy, the author forces us to start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
We have to look at where we first learn about connection and love, which is from our parents.
Right.
He reflects extensively on his own parents, noting that he spent decades observing their care. And the stunning part of his reflection is that he never sensed even the slightest trace of self-interest in their love.
Not even a hint.
Not a hint. He highlights his mother in particular, describing how she gave silently, never complaining, and never demanding a single thing in return. He goes so far as to compare his parents to two Buddhas.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because comparing parents to Buddhas is a beautiful image, but it highlights a massive clash with traditional societal norms.
Oh, definitely.
If you think about the way our modern relationships operate, they essentially function like like a financial ledger.
Yeah.
You pick up the tab for lunch today, I pick it up tomorrow.
You remember my birthday, I remember yours.
Exactly. And that ledger system applies heavily to families, too. There is this deeply ingrained, unspoken societal contract. Parents sacrifice to take care of their kids now, with the underlying expectation that the kids will take care of them when they're old.
Right, elder care as a return on investment.
Yeah, we're conditioned to keep score. But Twiffing is describing a dynamic where the ledger doesn't just balance out perfectly. The ledger simply does not exist.
What's fascinating here is the cultural weight of what he is dismantling. In many Asian cultures, and certainly in the broader global context, the concept of filial piety is the absolute bedrock of family structure.
It's expected.
It's mandatory. Filial piety is, by definition, an intergenerational debt. It is the ultimate ledger. You owe your parents for the very breath in your lungs, and society expects you to repay that debt through obedience. But Zwiffing explicitly states that his parents never expected any filial repayment. By stripping away that expectation and viewing them as Buddhas, he shifts the parent-child dynamic away from biological duty.
It stops being a social contract.
Exactly. It elevates parenting to a pure spiritual ideal.
Giving life and nourishment without attaching an invoice to it.
That is exactly the point. The absence of the invoice is what makes the love pure.
I mean, I can see how you might occasionally find that kind of unconditional love from parents. It is the cultural ideal of parenthood, even if it is rarely achieved in practice. But it's one thing to experience that from the people who literally gave you life.
Sure.
It is something else entirely to find that out in the competitive world of your peers, out in the wild, so to speak. Yet Shuofeng claims he has experienced this exact same purity from friends.
He does. He moves from his family to his lifelong friends, specifically naming two individuals, Xu Binyi and Lu Jingkai. He describes the kindness they showed him over the years as crystal clear and pure, entirely free of any calculation or impurity. And he also expands the circle to include his teachers, stretching all the way from his elementary school days up through university.
Okay.
He details how these educators poured an endless wealth of knowledge and spiritual nourishment into him, and he openly acknowledges that he never did anything for them in return.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, because his emotional reaction to all of this generosity is highly unusual.
The shame aspect, yeah.
He writes that whenever he recalls the countless things these friends did for him, he feels deeply ashamed because their noble character is far beyond his reach. Now, I have to push back on that reaction.
Go for it.
Why would someone feel deeply ashamed by a friend's kindness? If you have great friends who do wonderful things for you, the natural, healthy response should be immense gratitude. Feeling shame implies you have done something wrong.
That is the typical psychological reading of shame, certainly. Usually we associate shame with guilt or a failure of character, but in the philosophical context of this text, we have to look at the mechanism of what is happening to his ego.
Okay, how so?
Standing in the direct presence of true, uncalculated virtue can be an intensely humbling experience. Think about it when someone gives to you with absolute zero expectation of return, and you recognize that your own internal operating system still runs on ledgers and calculations.
Oh, I see. The realization is jarring.
Very jarring. You realize you cannot match their purity of intention.
So it's the realization that someone else is operating on a completely different moral frequency.
That is a great way to phrase it. It is not a toxic, self-destructive shame. It is a profound humility. It is the ego shrinking in the face of something transcendent. He is recognizing his own human limitations.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if you look at how he views his teachers, the concept solidifies. He focuses heavily on the one-way flow of spiritual nourishment. In our modern, highly transactional world, education is a trade. You pay tuition, you sit in a seat, you receive a degree.
Transaction complete.
Exactly. But he looks past the financial transaction to the essence of teaching itself. You can never truly pay your second-grade teacher back for the foundational architecture they built in your mind.
Yeah, that's so true.
He is drawing vast spiritual energy from these people precisely because he recognizes he is the beneficiary of immense unpayable gifts.
We're all essentially built on the unpayable debts of the people who mentored us. I can accept that. But the philosophy takes a massive, wild turn next.
It really does scale up here.
Right, because it makes sense to receive pure love from parents, friends, and teachers. But Shuofeng claims he takes this non-transactional philosophy out into the broader world, and he starts finding this exact same purity in random global encounters, even in highly rigid bureaucratic systems.
This is the moment in the essay where his theory scales up from personal observation to universal application. He traces his journey around the globe, specifically stating that true feelings surround him like a protective halo.
A protective halo.
Yeah, and he details a surprisingly diverse list of encounters. He mentions a middle school classmate. He mentions Black employees who worked for him during his time in Africa. And then he gets into the bureaucracy you mentioned earlier.
The public officials.
Right. He specifically highlights the newly appointed police chief and officers in a place called Lincoln.
Which is in Yunnan province, right?
Yes, and this was during the construction of the fourth home of the Lifechanyuan community. For context, Lifechanyuan is an intentional community he founded. Essentially, a group attempting to practically live out these exact non-transactional, selfless ideals.
And building a community like that involves land, permits, and intense local oversight.
Exactly. He also mentions a public security director and a police officer in Xinjiang, which occurred during the construction of another community branch called the Gizar Home. When recalling all these people, from employees in Africa to public security directors in Xinjiang, he says he is deeply moved by their utter sincerity.
I am stuck on the sheer randomness of that list.
Yeah.
To use an analogy, the way he describes this protective halo sounds a bit like a tuning fork.
A tuning fork?
Yeah, like if you walk into a room vibrating at a frequency of total, uncalculated sincerity, eventually the people in that room start resonating at that same frequency.
Hmm?
Or maybe like a literal force field in a video game that just shields him.
I like the tuning fork analogy.
Because otherwise, you have to assume that police chiefs and zoning boards in Lincoln and Xinjiang are just naturally overflowing with unconditional love.
Okay.
And let's be honest, bureaucracy is basically the opposite of true feelings.
Oh, entirely.
Bureaucracy is entirely calculated, it's rule-bound, it's suspicious, and it's transactional.
Which is why this raises an important question regarding the psychology of these interactions. Are these officials inherently operating with pure sincerity, or does the author's complete lack of calculation actually elicit this response from them?
Right, is he pulling it out of them?
We have to look at the mechanism of human reciprocity. Construction projects, especially those involving intentional communities, are notoriously fraught. They are filled with friction, negotiations, power dynamics.
Lots of red tape.
So much red tape. The typical approach to a public security director is defensive. You walk in with your guard up, ready to bargain or protect your interests.
You treat them as an obstacle.
Precisely. And they know that. A bureaucrat or a police chief is used to being treated as an obstacle, a threat, or a tool, so they keep their official mask firmly in place.
Makes sense.
But when you approach an authority figure without any calculation, without scheming to manipulate an outcome, you trigger cognitive dissonance. You disrupt their expected pattern of interaction.
Oh, wow.
You are vibrating like that tuning fork with pure sincerity. Because you aren't fighting them or trying to extract a transaction, they literally cannot categorize you as a typical threat.
And so the tuning fork disarms them. It invites the person sitting across the desk to just drop the bureaucratic mask and engage simply as a human being.
The true feelings penetrate the official roles. The hierarchy dissolves. This is what he means by the protective halo.
It's not magic.
No, it is not a magical force field blocking bad things. It is an internal posture that transforms the environment around him. By refusing to engage in the transactional game, he changes the rules of the encounter entirely, drawing out the genuine humanity of the people he interacts with.
That is a staggering way to navigate the world, and it creates a perfect logical bridge to where these global encounters ultimately lead him.
Yes, turning it inward.
Because if this non-transactional approach works to melt away hostility-informed bureaucracies, it makes sense that he would turn this philosophy inward. His most profound experiences of this purity are found within his own intentional community. And this brings us to the ultimate and, frankly, the most challenging imperative he has for you, the listener.
He distills all of these decades of observation into a strict philosophical directive.
Let's lay out the purest examples he provides first. He points to the members of his community, referring to them as the Chanyuan Celestials in Lifechanyuan. He describes them as completely untainted by any self-interest.
Which is incredibly rare.
Very. He also brings up his family again, specifically his 2 elder and 3 younger brothers, noting that they offer him nothing but deep respect and heartfelt sincerity. He is so overwhelmed by this environment that he asks the heavens what he did to deserve this kindness, which he says is 1,000 times more precious than gold.
He fully recognizes the extreme rarity of a community functioning entirely on true feelings.
He does. But then he pivots. He turns around and hands the listener the ultimate lesson based on this 60-year experiment. He says that on life's journey, whenever you meet someone, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, superiors, romantic partners, you must never calculate. You must never scheme.
Never.
And here is the truly controversial part. He insists that you must offer genuine feelings, even if someone is explicitly not a good person, provided they have not harmed you.
Right.
He warns that the absolute greatest regret in life is betraying true feelings. His final instruction is to give freely, leave everything else to Tao, and never blame others.
It's a heavy directive.
So what does this all mean for us in practice? Because I have to push back hard on the practical application here.
I figured you might.
Telling people to give genuine, uncalculated feelings to someone who's explicitly not a good person, that sounds like a recipe for getting scammed. In the real world, if you drop your guard around people with bad intentions, you get taken advantage of. It feels deeply naive.
It is a completely valid concern, and it's the natural psychological resistance every single person feels when they are asked to drop their defensive ledgers.
Yeah, it's how we survive.
We use calculation to keep ourselves safe. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of his philosophy, we have to look closely at 2 things: his specific safety valve and his definition of the Tao.
The safety valve being the phrase, as long as they have not harmed you.
Yes. He is not advocating for blind victimhood or martyrdom. He is not saying you should stand there and let abusive people destroy your life.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
Very important. But beyond that safety valve is the concept of the Tao. When he says, leave everything else to Tao, he isn't just saying whatever will be, will be. In this context, Tao represents the underlying natural order of the universe. It is the ultimate efficiency of life.
Okay.
When we calculate, scheme, and worry about getting scammed, we are trying to forcefully control the future. We're trying to guarantee a return on our emotional investment.
We are trying to outsmart the universe.
Exactly. But Shuifeng is arguing that human calculation actually disrupts the natural efficiency of the Tao. By stepping out of the way and giving freely without expectation, you allow the natural order to resolve the situation far better than your scheming ever could.
But, okay, what if you step out of the way and the person still takes advantage of your sincerity? What then?
This is the crux of his entire essay. According to Shuifeng, the true danger in life is not getting tricked.
It's not.
No. The true danger is not losing a transaction or being taken advantage of by a bad person. The greatest tragedy is allowing a bad person to turn you into someone who calculates and schemes.
Oh. Let me just pause and sit with that for a second. You are saying the ultimate tragedy is losing your own capacity for true feelings.
Yes. If you constantly keep your guard up, if you run a mental ledger on every new person you meet, just in case they are not a good person, you are the one who loses.
Because you shut yourself off.
You lock yourself out of the spiritual energy he drew from his teachers. You dismantle your own protective halo. The tragedy isn't being scammed. The tragedy is becoming a cynic.
Wow.
By giving freely to everyone, you maintain the purity of your own internal state. You refuse to let the transactional nature of the modern world corrupt your spirit. And you never blame others, because your genuine feelings were never dependent on their reciprocation in the first place.
That reframes everything. Your sincerity is entirely independent of their reaction.
Completely independent.
So let's trace this entire journey back through causally to see how we arrived here. We started with the foundation, the Buddha-like selflessness of parents who give life with zero expectation of a filial piety ledger.
Right.
That baseline of unconditional giving allowed the author to recognize the profound, ego-shrinking humility of receiving unpayable spiritual nourishment from lifelong friends and teachers.
The spiritual energy.
Yes, and armed with that humility, he walked into the world acting like a tuning fork of sincerity, melting away the calculated masks of foreign bureaucrats and police chiefs.
Changing the rules of the game.
Which ultimately proved to him that if you refuse to keep score and leave the outcomes to the natural efficiency of the Tao, you can build a life and even an entire community that is 1,000 times more precious than gold.
It is a stunningly cohesive philosophy that moves from the intimacy of family to the mechanics of the universe. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that bridges this ancient philosophy with our very modern lives.
Okay, let's hear it.
If true feelings are entirely freely given and require absolutely no reciprocation, how might our physical bodies actually change if we completely abandon the reflex to keep a mental ledger?
Oh, it's interesting.
We live in an era defined by chronic stress, anxiety, and burnout. We constantly search for medical or therapeutic interventions. But what if the ledger itself, the exhausting, endless, subconscious act of calculating what we are owed by our partners, our bosses, and our friends, is actually the primary engine of our physical suffering?
What if dropping the ledger is the ultimate stress relief? That is an incredible thought to carry forward into your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go out into the world, we challenge you to try it. Drop the mental ledger for just one interaction today. Stop calculating and see if you can spark your very own protective halo. Catch you next time.